I never thought I'd feel this calm standing at the edge of it all, my office overlooking the city skyline, the late afternoon sun glinting off glass towers, the hum of life outside my window. My silk blouse whispered against my skin as I leaned back in my chair, savoring a rare moment of quiet. Everything looked perfect. Everything appeared perfect. Then my phone buzzed, and the world shifted. A message from my brother, the one whose life my parents had always promised I'd fund, blinked on the screen. "Hey, we need to talk about money." The words were innocent enough on the surface, but they carried the echo of a lifetime. I remembered that night vividly. The words my parents had said as if passing down a family decree. "Don't worry, we'll make your sister pay for everything." At 17, my stomach had dropped, my throat had tightened, and I'd stared at them, hurt and stunned, wondering how love could feel like betrayal. Now, standing in my sleek office, a million miles away from that small, cramped kitchen, a quiet smile played at my lips.
Pride.
Hurt. A touch of irony. The little girl who had been told she'd pay for everything? She had survived.
Thrived.
And for the first time, she was ready to confront the past, on her own terms. I set my phone down, took a deep breath, and let the memory of that moment fuel me. The reckoning was coming, but this time, I would be the one in control. I was 17, curled up on the edge of the kitchen table, my hands trembling slightly as I listened to the words that would haunt me for years. My parents sat across from me, a casualness in their tone that made my chest tighten. My brother, Michael, barely 15, was smirking as if the world owed him something he hadn't yet earned. "Don't worry," my father said, leaning back in his chair like he'd just delivered the news of the century. "We'll make your sister pay for everything." The words landed like a punch. My fork clattered against my plate, my stomach twisted into knots, and my throat burned. "Excuse me?" I whispered, voice barely audible. "It's nothing personal," my mother added, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "It's just how things work. She'll figure it out." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream that I wasn't some bank account for my brother's life, that my dreams mattered too. But all I could feel was the sting of dismissal, the sharp pang of being unseen, unheard. My hands shook as I gripped the edge of the table, nails digging into the wood. I didn't have much then, but I had something my parents couldn't touch, a spark of stubbornness, a refusal to be owned. Grandma's words echoed in my mind. "You can bend with the wind, but never let it break your roots, Lily." I held that advice close, a lifeline amid the chaos. That night, I packed a small bag, not knowing where I would go or what I would do, but knowing I had to leave the space where I was made to feel expendable. I borrowed a few dollars from my part-time job at the corner cafe, stuffed a notebook with my plans into my backpack, and stepped out into the cool night air. The city felt alive and indifferent, but it was mine to conquer, not theirs to dictate. Walking away, I made a silent vow. I wouldn't just survive. I would build a life so undeniable, so entirely my own, that no one could ever assume they had a claim on it again. That night, the weight of their expectations fell away, replaced by the first, exhilarating taste of freedom. The first few months after leaving home were terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I slept on couches, worked long shifts at a cafe, and spent evenings hunched over my notebook, sketching ideas, budgeting every dime, and dreaming of a life that felt impossibly out of reach. Every dollar I earned was a small rebellion, a quiet promise to myself that I would never be anyone's pawn again. It was during one of those nights that I met Mara. She was a seasoned consultant with an impeccable eye for talent, someone who saw not the exhausted, scared girl hunched over a notebook in a dim cafe, but the spark she had buried deep inside. "You have something rare," she said, sliding a coffee across the table. "You're not afraid to fight for yourself, and that's gold in this world. Let me help you turn it into something unstoppable." With Mara's guidance, I learned the rules of the business world: networking, pitching, negotiating. I burned the midnight oil mastering skills I never thought I'd have. Each small victory was a thrill: landing my first client, turning a modest project into a lucrative deal, feeling my confidence swell with each milestone. Still, I kept it all secret. My family, who had once laughed at my dreams, would never know. My social media profiles were carefully curated to look ordinary. I posted photos of coffee cups and sunsets, never mentioning the multi-million-dollar project I had just closed, the small team of employees I now managed, or the investment portfolio I had built from scratch. The hardest moments weren't the long hours or the self-doubt. It was the temptation to let resentment creep in. There were nights I imagined showing them, mocking their assumptions, reminding them that I could have fallen, but instead I soared. But Mara reminded me gently, "Your success isn't revenge. It's your life. Keep it for yourself first. Everything else is a bonus." By my mid-20s, I had quietly built an empire of my own design. A sleek, boutique consulting firm, clients across the country, and a network of colleagues who respected and believed in me. I had learned to trust my instincts, to navigate challenges with poise, and to savor victories without fanfare. Yet every paycheck, every recognition, carried a quiet satisfaction. I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving, funded entirely by my sweat and ingenuity. Every penny they once assumed they could claim had been earned, saved, invested. A silent triumph that belonged only to me. I would occasionally glance at the framed photo of Grandma on my office desk, her gentle smile a reminder that strength could be quiet, tenacious, and beautiful all at once. And in that moment, I realized that I was ready. Ready to face the past, ready to confront the family who had underestimated me, ready to show them exactly what it meant to take everything they thought they owned and make it mine. The knock on my office door was deliberate, almost ceremonial, like the universe had timed it perfectly. I had known this day would come. The day they would walk into my world expecting to see the same scared, dependent girl they once dismissed. But that girl had been gone for years. I straightened my blazer, smoothed the crease in my skirt, and walked toward the door with a calm that felt almost intoxicating. "Lily," my mother's voice broke the silence, tentative, as if she weren't sure she'd even recognize me. Behind her, Michael trailed, fidgeting, his eyes darting around, trying to gauge if the apartment, no, the empire, matched the person standing before them. I opened the door fully, letting them take in the space, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, soft sunlight reflecting off the polished hardwood floors. Expensive art adorned the walls, abstract pieces I had purchased with my first real bonus, and the subtle scent of jasmine and coffee filled the room. A small, elegant desk displayed neatly arranged papers, awards, and a framed photo of my grandmother. Every item whispered a story of struggle, patience, and triumph. They stared. My mother's lips parted, but no words came. Michael's eyes widened as he took in the modern furniture, the subtle but unmistakable symbols of success. He opened his mouth, closed it again. I gestured for them to sit, my voice steady, even calm. "I suppose you're here to talk about money," I said, a hint of irony threading through my words. "Or perhaps to remind me of what you've always assumed was mine to give." Their silence spoke volumes. "I'm going to be honest," I continued, pacing slowly, letting each word land. "Every dollar I earned since I left home, every client, every contract, every investment, I've earned it all. And yes, I've taken every penny I made. Every cent you assumed you could claim has stayed in my name, in my control. Not because I wanted to hurt you, but because this is my life. My hard work, my decisions, my independence." Michael's jaw tightened, his face a mixture of shame and disbelief. My mother's hands trembled, and for a moment, I saw her truly see me, not the girl she had underestimated, but the woman I had become. I let the silence linger, letting them absorb the truth. I could see the guilt flicker in their eyes, the realization that their assumptions, their words, and their favoritism had not only underestimated me, but fueled the very determination that had made me untouchable. Finally, I sat down at my desk, leaning forward slightly, my gaze unwavering. "I never asked for your help," I said. "I never needed it. And now, before we talk about anything else, you need to understand that the rules have changed." I am no longer the girl you once assumed could pay for everything. I am the woman who built everything herself, and I decide how it is used and by whom. My mother swallowed hard, and Michael's hands fidgeted in his lap. They weren't angry. They weren't triumphant. They were confronted with a truth they had never expected. The little girl they thought they could control had become untouchable, unstoppable, and entirely independent. For the first time in years, I felt the full weight of my own power, not in money alone, but in the knowledge that I had rewritten the story they had tried to dictate. Every expectation, every assumption they had made about me had been turned on its head. And this time, I held all the cards. I leaned back in my chair, watching them squirm in the unfamiliar weight of reality. For years, they had assumed I would bend, that I would pay for everything, that my worth was measured by my compliance. But the girl who once trembled at their words was gone. Now I had the upper hand, and I intended to use it wisely. "I'll help," I said, letting the words hang in the air like a promise they could neither predict nor control. "But there are conditions." My voice was calm, yet firm, carrying the gravity of every battle I had fought to arrive here. I turned to Michael first. "You will get a job, an honest one. You will learn to manage your own finances. No more assumptions, no more relying on others to fund your life. You'll face the world on your own terms, and I'll support your growth, not your laziness." His face fell, the sting of accountability hitting him like a cold wind. Then I looked at my mother. "You will stop undermining women in this family. You will listen, you will respect boundaries, and you will acknowledge that your children are not extensions of your will. You have to learn to love without control, to guide without dominating." She swallowed hard, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind, the weight of years of behavior finally reflected back at her. "And, my father, you will take responsibility for your part in all of this. You will apologize, and you will change how you treat people who trust you, not just me, but others who depend on you in ways that matter." Every word I spoke was deliberate, each condition a blend of justice and compassion. I wasn't punishing them. I was offering them a chance to grow, to heal, to rebuild what had been fractured. But there was no room for old patterns, no room for entitlement. They were quiet, absorbing the reality that their daughter, once thought powerless, was now a force of her own making. For the first time, they realized that their assumptions had backfired. My success, my control, my autonomy, it was not a gift. It was earned. And if they wanted to be part of it, they had to step up, not step on me. I saw subtle shifts in their expressions: hesitation, shame, recognition. Change would not be instant, but the first seed had been planted. And for the first time, I felt a sense of liberation not just from their expectations, but from the lingering ache of wanting their approval. I no longer needed it. I only needed honesty, effort, and respect, conditions I could enforce, not plead for. As I sat there, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows, I realized something profound. Power wasn't just taking control, it was defining the terms, drawing boundaries, and holding space for growth. I could be compassionate without surrendering my autonomy. I could care without compromising my self-worth. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely, undeniably free. Weeks passed after that confrontation, and slowly, subtly, I began to see change. Michael took his first real job at a marketing firm, fumbling at first but learning quickly. His pride in earning his own paycheck was unmistakable, and I caught glimpses of the humility he had lacked before. My mother began attending a women's leadership group at a local community center, her stubbornness softening as she listened, learned, and reflected. Occasionally, she would glance at me with something like awe, a quiet acknowledgement that I was no longer the girl she had underestimated. My father, perhaps the slowest to change, started to take responsibility for the decisions he had long shrugged off. He apologized with sincerity, not just in words, but in action, offering support without control, listening without judgment. I could see him wrestling with old patterns, but for the first time, I sensed a willingness to grow. I, too, had evolved. The girl who once trembled at the thought of being taken for granted had become a woman who defined her own worth, built her own empire, and commanded respect on her terms. Every penny I had earned, every late night, every sacrifice, had shaped me into someone unshakable, yet compassionate. On my desk sat the framed photo of Grandma, her words still echoing in my mind. "You can bend with the wind, but never let it break your roots." I reached out, brushing my fingers over the glass. Those roots had carried me through heartbreak, betrayal, and doubt, and now they held me steady as I guided others toward growth. I took a deep breath, letting the calm settle over me like sunlight. This was the life I had fought for, independent, empowered, and in control. I had given them a chance to meet me on my terms, and some had taken it. Others were learning. The rest was no longer my burden to carry. And in that moment, I realized the truth that had taken years to embrace. Strength wasn't just in wealth or success. It was in standing tall, setting boundaries, and choosing yourself when no one else would. I smiled softly, feeling the weight of the past finally lift. "They once promised my brother I'd pay for everything," I whispered to no one in particular, letting the words roll off my tongue. And I did, but on my own terms. Freedom, justice,
Growth.
all mine.